All right. Well, welcome everyone. Sorry about getting started just a couple minutes late. Welcome everyone to Touch Presentation. We're going to be talking about when you should touch or tap your TSP. A little bit of background about myself. I do see a lot of new faces on the webinar tonight, so welcome for those of you who are new, and for those of you who've been on our webinars before, welcome back. My name is John Mantilla. I'm one of the co-founders here and CEO of Parco, and we work with federal employees across the country and around the world, helping them plan their retirements and finances, no matter what stage of their life or their career that they're in. We spoke with folks the other day that were in their early 20s, wanting to make sure that they've positioned themselves right for the future, that they're saving well. We work with folks that are midlife, mid-career, wanting to make sure that they're positioned well for their kids, their family, and then certainly more and more we've been working with folks near the end of their career or post-retirement, wanting to make sure that they're positioned well for the future. And we got to do a lot of folks. Can you hear me now? You can hear me now. Okay. All right. Well, it was a nice intro. Um, but I'm just saying, I'm grateful to be presented to you all today. And it's I do see a lot of new names on. So for those of you who are new, welcome, and for those of you who've been back, our company is Parco, stands for Pension Americans Retirement Company, and we help federal employees across the country and around the world plan their retirements, no matter what stage of the career that they're in, be it early career, be it late career. And we work with folks USA Today, Wall Street Journal. Um, if you guys do have audio issues, let me know and I will try to come up. I've got the chat window open here. So if there's still issues, tell me. We'll keep it going. We're going to be talking about when to tap and what happens when you touch your TSP. So we'll talk about kind of like what's happening out there in the economy. We'll talk about the different TSP rules. We'll talk about why people touch their TSP, when it can make sense and when it's a big mistake. We'll talk about some of the costs of doing so, and then we'll talk about some alternatives. Some echo as well. And move here a little closer. I will speak a little more slowly, and we'll see if that works. And just keep giving me that feedback if you're having trouble hearing anything. So the reason why we're doing the presentation tonight is that many of you may have seen this in the news that a record number of Americans tapped their 401k savings last year in 2025 coming into 2026. That number was 6% of people. 6% of people touched their retirement savings for some reason last year. This was almost double what happened last year, and it's triple the pre-COVID norm. So this is a big shift, right? I mean, if you think about most Americans, aside from their house, their 401k is their biggest retirement savings asset. The fact that people are having to touch that before they retire is a really big indicator of problems within the economy. So when it comes to the TSP, which is government employees you all have access to, there's different things that you can. We've been seeing this behavior as well, where people are taking out more TSP loans, taking out more hardship withdrawals, and taking out more early withdrawals after separation. So taking money out when they're younger, maybe before they usually had planned to. And so the key question that we're going to try to talk about tonight is accessing your TSP ever a smart financial decision? And when is it and when is it definitely not? So when we talk about your TSP or any 401k, this is true for any 401k, there's different ways that you can access your money. And it depends on your employment status as well as your age. So if you're employed and under 59 and a half, you can take out a TSP loan. You could take out what's called a hardship withdrawal, and we're going to define these in just a minute. You can't, if you're under 59 and a half, take out regular or penalty-free withdrawals, and you can't do an IRA rollover if you're under 59 and a half. Once you're over 59 and a half, you have some more options. You can do TSP loans, you can do IRA rollovers, you can do regular withdrawals. The reason why you can't do a hardship withdrawal is since you're over age 59 and a half, you're not restricted. So you can't do a hardship withdrawal because any withdrawal is not a hardship. If you're separated and under age 55, and actually you can do IRA rollovers and you can take hardship withdrawals, but you can't take it out of TSP loan and you can't take out regular withdrawals. And if you're over 55, you can take out TSP loans, or you can't take out TSP loans, and you can't take out hardship withdrawals because you can take out regular withdrawals or IRA. So, what do all of these mean? And there should be an X. So, there's different types. There's general purpose loans, and there's residential loans. So, a general purpose loan you can take out for a maximum of 5 years, and you pay it back while you're working biweekly. Important thing, you can only take out TSP loans. And Mr. Darrell, if you do have a question, just ask it within the chat window and I'll answer it for you. You can take it out. You can take out general purpose loan or residential loan. A general purpose loan maxes out at $50,000. They had temporarily increased that during COVID, and you have to pay it back bi-weekly. Residential loans, as long as you follow the rules. Yeah. Residential loans, as long as you follow the rules, you can take longer to pay it back, but you have to be using it for home or home related purchases. So generally with the folks that we work with in the government, the vast majority of the TSP loans that we see are general purpose loans. Now, when you take out a TSP loan, the interest rate on a TSP loan is based on the G fund. And importantly, and I had this conversation with the client today, a lot of folks don't realize this. When you have an interest rate on your TSP loan, that interest that you pay is paid back into your TSP. It's a loan you've made to yourself. So it's not like that money is going to the government or some bank. That's a loan back to yourself. And the current G fund rate, which is the current TSP loan rate, is 4%. Now, that's about TSP loans. When it comes to hardship withdrawal, a hardship withdrawal is when you take money out of your 401k or your TSP when you're not normally eligible to take that money out. So you're not over age 59 and a half or you're not retired. If you take this money out, it is a withdrawal. So it's money going into your bank account. It counts as income for you. So if you take out a $10,000 hardship withdrawal, that $10,000 will count as income for you on your taxes. But then also you'll have to pay an additional 10% early withdrawal tax of 10%. So, think about it. The government really disincentivizes, Congress really disincentivizes folks from taking withdrawals out of their 401ks and their IRAs because that money is meant to be there for your retirement. You can also do what are called post-separation withdrawals. So this is if you're over age 55, you can take out a withdrawal from and you separate from service. So you have to be over age 55 and separated from service. You can take withdrawals out of your 401k or your TSP without any penalty. So you have to be separated to do this. That's a way to access money in your TSP without any penalty. So let's talk about the reasons why people might tap their TSP, especially while they're still working, especially while they're younger. Well, generally, it tends to happen for one of four main reasons: either a financial emergency, a need for a debt consolidation, a need for a major purchase, or to finance some kind of life. So people ask us, hey, like, when would it make sense? When would it not? Well, let's say you need it for a financial emergency. Let's say there's a medical bill or something that's happened where you need cash. Well, sometimes touching your TSP is a necessity, right? You don't have another option. So while that's not something that we would recommend somebody do, sometimes you don't have another option. So you have to do. Then there's things where people have debt consolidation. We'll actually go through an example of this tonight, but I would say that this is actually, you might be surprised, but it's probably the most common reason people take out TSP loans that we see is they say, hey, look, I had a bunch of credit card debt from COVID or my kids had to move back. It could be anything. And so I had a lot of credit card debt. What do I do? Well, TSP loan can be a really powerful way to consolidate your debt. And instead of making the credit card company and the credit card bank rich, you pay yourself back. So as long as it's for something like that, it can be really. Then people will say, "Hey, look, I want to make a major purchase. I want to buy a home, or I need to do a big renovation for my bathroom, or I want to redo my kitchen." This is where it starts to get a little bit murkier because you're rating your retirement assets, which can grow and be invested in the market, in something that's temporal, right? It's in the real world, and you're going to use it, right? It's your house. It gets exposed to wear and tear, and so that that tends to be a little bit trickier. Usually when folks say, "Hey, look, I want to take out a TSP loan or I want to take a withdrawal to redo my kitchen," we always say, "Well, look, let's try to investigate some other options first before we do that." Because you're robbing yourself of compounding, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then one of the things we'd really recommend against, and you'd be surprised, but we do see it happen, is people will take money out of their TSP to fund their lifestyle. It could be they purchase a boat, they purchase a car, they decide to go on a big vacation or make a major splurge or buy a luxury good. And they say, well, look, I want to reward myself with this, so I'm going to take money out of my TSP and buy this thing that I'm effectively going to consume. We really can't recommend against that strongly enough. And we'll walk through some of the math on that here in just a bit. So, when using your TSP can make sense, things like avoiding these catastrophic financial outcomes. If you're trying to avoid a foreclosure, getting forced out of your house, avoid a bankruptcy, if you have a medical expense that you have to finance, well, sometimes you need to do that. Um, Same thing with credit card consolidation. If you have a credit card that's at 24% and you can pay that off and instead pay yourself back at 4%, well, you're pocketing that difference. Also, if you have a short-term liquidity need and really need to take the money out, but have a clear path to how you'll replenish that money into your TSP, these are the situations where we say, hey, look, I understand why you're doing this. But when you want to use your TSP or anything for something lavish, you really should consider these questions. Firstly, is it actually a necessity? Do you need that fancy bag or that fancy car, that fancy thing that you're trying to buy? Is the interest rate or the risk elsewhere worse than losing TSP growth by not having it? And then do I have a repayment strategy to replenish my balance? Because there's ways where it can be a really big mistake. Like if you're using it for vacations, car purchases, consumer goods, and frankly, when you hear the news from Vanguard, I think that a lot of people are feeling so stretched. They want to live a certain lifestyle. Maybe inflation's gotten bad. They want to keep their spending up. Maybe they're not getting a raise at work, so they raid their 401k to do so to finance their lifestyle. Well, that's really long term very damaging. Also, we've had clients ask us, "Hey, look, I want to take money out of my TSP and speculate on some, you know, for some folks, it's straight sports gambling or Kalshi or things like that, or other forms of speculation. That can lead to zeros, and zeros are not good in retirement. Like zeros meaning your balance goes to zero. Really, really not good. Because really, what ends up happening is you're not factoring in the opportunity cost of taking these withdrawals and the missed out compounding. So let's take an example here. Maybe you all want to put it in a guess. So let's say you took out a $20,000 withdrawal at age 40. If that money had stayed in and compounded for another 25 years and grew at 7%, so below the market's rate of return, below the S&P 500 return, what would that have grown to? Well, they gave it away. It would have grown to over that 20,000 would have grown to over 100,000. So by taking out that 20K when you were 40, you robbed yourself of $88,000 of gains by the time you're 65. That is a huge opportunity cost. And this opportunity cost isn't just the compounding. It's what you could do with that compounding. Okay, great. So there's a question from Christina. She asks, please clarify again. Those who are retired can no longer access loans. Whatever is the alternative for cash flow without triggering taxes. So you can only take out loans from your 401k or TSP while you're working. When you're retired, you can't take out a TSP loan. When you're retired, what you do is if you want to take money out of your TSP, you have to take that as a withdrawal. When you take that as a withdrawal, that money goes into your bank account and it counts as income for you, and then you'd owe taxes on that. Does that make sense, Christina? I'm going to keep going. So when we think about the major hidden costs of uh, those early withdrawals, those early touchings of your TSP, those early tappings of your TSP, you lose out on compounding, which can mean reduced retirement income, and then there's a behavioral risk component as well. So, for example, if you had kind of a similar example from before, if you had $50,000 in your TSP when you're 40, and you let that compound at 7% over 25 years, that 50,000 would grow to $270,000 by the time you're 65. If you took the 50K out today, none of that compounds. That's a zero. So that's $270,000 that you could have in the future that you don't have because you took it out now. Now, that's $270,000. That's the value. But that $270,000 also means that you have less money for you to use in the future. So a lot of people say, hey, look, I want to use my TSP or my retirement savings to help, throw off extra income in retirement. So if you had $270,000 in the TSP extra, and you were planning to do a 4% withdrawal rate, which we'll talk about more in a bit, that's an extra $900 a month on top of your pension, on top of your Social Security in retirement. So the implication here is that by taking out $50,000 at 40 years old, you've basically hampered yourself from having $900 a month for the rest of your life when you're 65. That's a real cost. It's like what, $900 a month divided by 50, that's like 4 years worth of payments. So like this is a real effect over the long. And then it also creates a real behavioral risk. And what we mean by that is that once you get in the habit, once you do it the first time, you touch your TSP or 1K, suddenly now you think of it psychologically as excessive. And so you're more likely to touch it again. And so there's real, not just financial risk, but just behavioral finance risk that comes with getting in the habit of touching money from your retirement savings. You really should be thinking about that money is there for your retirement. And so when you're thinking about different like alternatives, um, and like you want to touch your TSP, we always speak with folks and say, well, look, what is your long-term goals? When people say like, what should I do about my TSP as I'm planning for the future? I say, well, what do you want to do with this money? Some people say, hey, I want to live the same way I'm living now or preserve a certain lifestyle of retirement. For others, they'll say, I want to grow my money as much as I can. Others might say, hey, I want to leave as much behind to my beneficiaries. But for some, maybe it's a mix of all three of those. And so let's take an example of somebody like Federal Frank. You guys have seen his example before. He's 62 years old. He's been working for the government for a long time, so he's eligible to retire. He has $15,000 in credit card debt that's at 28% interest. His net pension is going to be $2,000 a month if he retires right now. His Social Security will be $1,500 a month. He'd like to have an extra $1,000 per month coming in, so $4,500. He has a TSP of $450,000 and he's invested aggressively. he says, like, what would make the most sense for me? How can I position myself? The question really is like, do I have enough to achieve my goals given this debt, given my income goal, and given how much I'll have? Well, the first thing we recommend Frank do is pay off the credit card debt, right? This is a good use of the TSP loan while he's working. This is a good opportunity to tap his TSP because instead of paying that $356 a month credit card payment, he'll just have a TSP loan payment back again to himself. So instead of this being a $356 outflow to American Express or Discover, it's a $276 back inflow to his account. Now, when he takes out this TSP loan, he'll ask himself, okay, hey, look, I took out the TSP loan, I've got this payment. Now I'm retiring. What's going to happen with my TSP? Well, you have three options when it comes to your TSP loan in retirement. And there's actually one that's new. So first you could write a check from your bank account to say, hey, look, TSP, I want to pay this loan back entirely. You can do that. The second option is to pay it back in installments in retirement. You can say, hey, look, I'm going to keep paying this $256 a month to pay it back. You used to not be able to pay a TSP loan back over time in retirement, but they let you do that now. And then third is you can tell TSP, hey, look, I don't want to pay this back. We actually worked with a client today. We called TSP and said, hey, look, we don't want to pay your TSP loan back. So TSP says, okay, no problem. That's by far the most common decision for folks as they approach, is they say, look, I don't want to pay this TSP loan back. And then that $15,000 they took out, whatever's remaining on that loan will count as income for them. So they'll get a 1099 from TSP. And then they'll just have to pay taxes on that in the following year. So in this example, instead of having to pay back $15,000 back into their 401k, they'll have to pay, call it about $3,000 in taxes in 2027. So that's by far the most common election for folks when it comes to what to do with TSP loans in retirement. So when he thinks about it, okay, hey, look, we've sorted out what we're going to do with the TSP in terms of the TSP loan and this credit card. What about this income goal? You know, we have another $435,000 left in there. Does Frank have to bridge that gap? Well, let's go back to that 4%. Well, it's this rule from the 1990s that says, hey, look, here's about how much you need to plan to withdraw to not run out of money in retirement. Well, a lot's changed since the 90s. Interest rates are lower. People are living longer. People now, if you've worked with us before, you hear us talk more and more about this 3%, which is a more current withdrawal strategy. And basically, what this rule tells us is how much you need to have set aside to achieve a certain income goal. So if you said, hey, look, I want an extra $1,000 a month, that's 12 grand a year, using the 4% rule, okay, we need to have $300,000 set aside. If we're using the 3% rule, we need to have a little bit more, right? Because 3% is a more conservative withdrawal amount, 400,000. So with Frank's $435,000 in savings, does he have enough? Well, if we use the 3% rule, that would imply that we need $400,000. However, the $1,000 that Frank needs, that's a net number. So we need to tax affect it. So when we account for taxes, he actually needs $1,250 a month because 250 of that's going to get paid out in taxes. So that means that he needs, using the 3% rule, $500,000 set aside. So now he's got a shortfall. He doesn't have enough to bridge the gap. And one of the things that we help our clients strategize is how do you make sure that when you're using your TSP and tapping your TSP, that you're doing so in the most optimal way, setting aside as little as possible for income while also leaving as much as possible for growth. So in Frank's case, when he says, hey, look, I want to pay off this credit card, am I in a good position to retire? Well, when he started, he had a $450,000 balance and $15,000 in credit card debt. After we repositioned, the credit card debt's gone because we took out the TSP loan. Then he retires, so there's no TSP loan left. We set aside, call it $205,000 to give him that $1,000 a month net of income. And then that allows him to have more, over $230,000. So over half his balance still available for growth because he wants to be invested aggressively. So this is where really, really smart planning and thinking about the future really comes in handy. It's not just about making the right decisions, it's also really about avoiding the bad decisions. You think back to that example from before, every dollar that that person took out for that $50,000 example would have become $4 to them 25 years from now. So when you're thinking about it, the takeaway, the TSP is one of the most powerful retirement tools that you as a federal employee have available to you. And when you need to take money from it, it should be really strategic and thoughtful. And you really like compound interest. Einstein said it, eighth wonder of the world, one of the most powerful things available to you. It's about time in the market, not timing the market. And so if you can avoid making those withdrawal decisions instead of being really purposeful, you minimize the risk that you're going to permanently damage creation. And this is what we at Parco have built our retirement and financial planning platform for federal every single day. But when you set a time, when you create your free account on our site, we walk through all those different strategies for you, and you can always set time. We encourage you to create an account, set up a free one with one of our teammates. We'll walk through. So I know we went through a lot tonight. I'm sure there's a lot of questions that you all have, but please let those come through. Hopefully you're finding, hopefully you're finding this. Thank you, Sally. This actually, while the questions are coming in, this webinar presentation came as a suggestion from a previous webinar attendee. So we mention this every week, but if there is a topic that you'd like us to cover, please mention it here. We add it to the roster and build it up. And also, I wonder how you all heard about this, either through email, going on around Facebook. There's a lot of people on the webinar tonight, so we'd love to know how you heard about us. Okay, excellent. More emails, notifications. Wonderful. Well, I'll leave the floor open for a few more minutes just to answer any and all questions that come in. Oh, we always love recommendations. Thank you. Wonderful question. So if you withdraw from TSP, should you withdraw from the traditional or the Roth first? Well, I'd say it really depends on what you need to use the money for. And the reason why I say that is that if you're saying, hey, look, I want to take a withdrawal, and you are retired, usually, frankly, Robert, we recommend the traditional first because traditional is exposed to RMDs, whereas Roth is not. And so if you're going to have to, if the government's going to force you to start taking RMDs when you turn 73 or 74 or 75, you might as well draw from that first. Now, if your spouse is still working or you're in like a higher income tax bracket, there can be some permutations that make that rule, that there's exceptions to that rule, but that's generally the case. Oh, that was helpful. There's a question, do we charge for our services? So we don't charge for any of our retirement planning or our financial planning advice. Now, as a company, we do retirement planning, we do life insurance planning, we do income planning, we have our own financial advisory and RIA practice. So if you engage us to help, if you want to serve as your financial advisor, we charge for that. But we never charge for any of our one-on-one meetings or individual retirement consultations. And we don't charge for our platform either. And I'll say our platform's really good. We've gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of the folks on the call tonight about how we can make it better and how to improve it over the past several months. And hopefully you're all seeing that come through. Because our goal is really to build, we think every federal employee should have access to the best retirement and financial planning advice at their fingertips. And we know that federal employees have unique benefits and financial positions that make them different than most Americans. And we know that most financial advisors and most fintech companies don't build their products with feds in mind. What we have. And so our aim is to be the best source for you all to get the best advice possible so you can focus on enjoying retirement and not having to worry about your money or your financial. John asked, do you forego the government match if you root contributions to the Roth TSP? Great question. So if you contribute to a Roth TSP, that's totally fine. But government matching contributions only go into the traditional. So you'll still get the match. They just won't go to the Roth. They'll just go into the traditional. Vaughn asked a great question. Are there times when it makes sense to convert any TSP to Roth TSP funds or to regular IRA or Roth IRA? So, Vaughn, I'd say there's kind of two pieces to your question. When it comes to doing a Roth conversion, whether you do it from the traditional TSP or the after retirement, I assume so. Because Roth conversions first always make sense once you're retired because you're usually in a lower tax bracket. Whether you do that the TSP or within an IRA, that's really your prerogative. We usually recommend folks do Roth conversions outside the TSP because you have a lot more flexibility on how the taxes are withheld. Whereas with TSP, I think it's a statutory withholding of 20%. And for most folks, that's too much. So when it comes to doing a Roth conversion, I'd never tell somebody to make a mistake by doing one while they're retired if it made sense and where they did it. But we typically see folks do it in the IRA world outside of their 401k, outside of the TSP, just because they have more flexibility. And in a similar way, a lot of folks move their money outside the TSP as they approach or enter retirement or even after retiring because they want that flexibility. Maybe there's a financial product or there's an investment that they want to invest in. And the TSP is a fantastic savings or an investment vehicle while you're working. I think its simplicity is actually a big benefit to you all. But when you get into retirement, you want to tighten it up and you say, hey, look, maybe I want to buy certain stocks or I want to work with an advisor. Or I want to buy certain products. TSP is just not going to offer those. And so that's why we see a lot of people move their money outside the TSP when they retire. And assuming if you're older than 59 and a half for accessing the dollars to do regular for Roth versus 55 for TSP. That's exactly right. So the one caveat is that if you retire before you're 59 and a half, we always recommend folks keep money in the TSP, at least some of it, because you have a lot more ability to access that money than you do from a normal IRA. Now, there's exceptions to that because of the rule of 55 and with 72T distributions, you can touch your money in IRAs, but it's just a little less flexible. Great questions, Vaughn. Great questions. The chat's alive tonight. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm not seeing a whole lot more questions coming through. So, as always, it's a real pleasure to present to you all. You know, next week we've got a presentation up at Walter Reed on Wednesday. So I'm 50-50 on whether or not we're going to present it. I'll probably decide that tonight. But I know this is a very important topic. We had a lot of response to it. So if it means I have to drink an extra Red Bull and we'll do an encore next week, I think we will. Just because it's so important, and I think more and more people are touching their 401k savings because they think that's their only option, and they may not really understand the implications of what they're doing. So it's a really important conversation. So if there's friends or colleagues that you think should hear about this, you know, we post the link to RSVP to the webinar right on our website, goparco.com. You can also send them a referral and we'll add them to our mail list. We've got a lot of exciting stuff happening at Parco over the next several weeks. We're excited to show you all. So with that, I'll leave you all. Have a great night and have a great week. And we'll see you all next week. Be well.